Welcome back. So with the last two videos being about orchids and moss, I thought I would follow it up with how I water my orchids that I have in moss or in a moss bark mixture. I've got a Phalaenopsis right here, and I have a Cattleya that's in a bark moss mixture. But first, let's talk about sphagnum moss. Now, this is the New Zealand sphagnum moss that was sent to me by our sponsor, Orchid Supply Store. And if you would like to get 12% off your next order, go ahead and go to orchidsupply.com. Enter TRISH at checkout in the gift certificate coupon area, and you'll get your 12% off. So let's talk about moss. Some people don't like it at all. Some people love it, and some people just don't have an opinion either way. I love it. I'm one of those. I love the sphagnum moss. Now, it is a moisture retentive media, so you do have to be careful on how you use it. And if you are new to using moss, I would say less watering is more until you kind of figure out what's going on. So I went ahead and grabbed some of this, and let me pour just a wee bit of water into the bowl here. Whoop, and spill it all over myself. I do that with this one. I don't know why I don't pay attention, but the rim always seems to get me. But luckily we have a towel. I'll just put it there. It'll absorb. Now, let's just put, and this is dry, completely dry, and we're just going to put it in there. And do you see? It is starting to absorb. So we're going to leave it there for a minute, and we're just going to kind of watch it. Now, the water that I use is filtered water from the Zero water filter, and currently it is at a pH, if I can get it to turn on, there we go. Currently it is at a pH, let me let it finish figuring itself out. And then let me hold it. All right, so currently it is at 6.43. So to use moss, you kind of want it between 5 and 6, but that 0.43 is not too bad. And the reason you want to use a lower pH when you're using moss is because moss can get acidic and raise the pH of your water, and orchids need a certain pH to absorb certain nutrients, and that is for another video. So, as you can see, this moss is already absorbed here, and it has not been more than, we'll say, a minute, 2 at the most. So it absorbs it up pretty quickly. Now let me show you guys something. Let's just take it out, and I'm just going to wring it out. Okay, now we still have some dry pieces right here. You see how those are still kind of dry? So we'll just pour this water back in here, and I'm just going to leave that there, and the little bit of water that's left, and by the end of the video all of that moss is going to be moistened. So how do I water my orchids that are in moss? Well, I have several ways that I like to do it. Move that out of the way here. So for those that are in a moss and bark mixture, such as my mini purple variation Karula, blue Hawaii 4N crossed with self, I like to, I don't know why I poured the water out because I need it again. What I like to do with her is, be more careful this time, I like to put water in, and this is how I do the bulk of my orchids that are in sphagnum moss, is I just take them and I set them in, and I leave them sitting for about 5-10 minutes. Let's see if we can turn her around. Here, but we'll watch as she absorbs water. We'll put her off to the side. Then I have my Luz Berry here, the one that I got from Orchid Classics. Just go and look at all those aerial roots. Look at those. Aren't those beautiful? Be very careful with those. But she is in all sphagnum moss. Now, I can pretty much tell from the weight that she is going on to dry. She is just damp, and her roots are still nice and green. This one, I do not wait for her to completely dry out before I water her, because since I've gotten her, this moss has stayed damp the entire time. And this little bit of algae that you see up here, that's because this part of the pot, the light hits it under the barinas, and that is the only place it is right here on the edges, because on the top I do have the bark to protect it. But what I do with her is, let me just move her out now, put her over there, and that's about how I do that one. And then I just literally will set her in, and let's see if I can show you real quick. But if you look down there at the bottom, do you see how you can already start seeing the moisture rise right in here? So what I do is I'll wait until this area or gets right above the water line, and then I just take her out and I put her directly back into her pot. And that is all the water that she gets. And by not allowing that moss to completely dry out, then that little bit of water that I just gave her is going to find its way through the whole pot. We'll wait a little bit and I'll show you her again. And then for my fowl here, with her, because she is in more bark than moss, but it's layered throughout, because when I put her in here, her roots were not that strong, so I wanted to encourage root growth. So for her, what I do is I just pour water in the back of the pot until I get, here we go. And I try to stay away from the crown. I do it right at the edge of the pot, and I fill this pot up, well, the bowl, which this is just an old food bowl that I've recycled to use for watering. And then once it gets to the top of the last set of holes, so once it gets to this set of holes right at the edge, I stop. And then I just leave her sitting in here until all of the moss has absorbed water. So we are going to move her to the side as well and look at her later. Now, my Harriella retricala, which has been in bloom since July of 2021, and as you can see is putting out lots more spikes there. And my Harriella retricala 3-lip, I think, yep, 3-lip, which I've only had since June of 2022, looks like it's going to be the same as this one and constantly in bloom, because the first bloom lasted a day or so, and then since then she's just been pushing out bloom after bloom, and she's got several new spikes coming as well. So this one, the Harriella retricala regular, as I like to call her, this moss is still damp, and I can tell because this pot is a little bit heavier than this one. This one is super light. The moss, you can see, looks completely dry. And what I do is I just set them in here and I let them soak for about 10 minutes. And I don't mind if this moss gets super wet because they enjoy their humidity. And so far it has worked for me. So I'm going to shut it off for a minute, and then we're going to come back as soon as everybody has absorbed their waters, and we'll talk a little bit more. So we'll be right back. So it's been about 10 minutes since we last spoke. And now what I do with the ones that are in all moss is I will just take the pot, drain out any excess like this, and I will just set it back in. And the reason I do that is because I have these pebbles at the bottom that the excess water can drain into, and this way it's not sitting in water and keeping the moss wet too long. Now you have to also take into consideration your environment. So if you are growing in a very cool environment, then your moss is going to stay wet a lot longer than if you live in a dry climate. Even if you live in a humid and dry climate, your moss is going to dry out faster than someone living in a really cool environment. Now, I grow in my home, so my temperature and environment is very controlled. My temperature range usually stays within 75, 77. It can get up to 80 degrees in the summertime if I have the windows open, which sounds like it would be really hot in the house, but it crosswinds, and where we live, we get a really good breeze off of the mountains, and so it stays fairly cool even at 80 degrees. So obviously it'll dry out quicker. However, 99% of the time, even though I live in my home, of course I live in my home, even though I grow in my home, I still have to water the ones that are in the smaller pots, such as the Hariella retrocallas here. I have to do this at least twice a week. Now, initially, before they started producing their roots, which the Hariella retrocalla 3-lip came with a great root system. The regular Hariella retrocalla did not have the best root system when I first put her in here, but has since grown a really good root system. And that's another kind of indicator, just side note here, indicator of if there are roots in the pot. Say you first put your orchid in and you water, and then it's 5 days and you have to water again. And then eventually you're having to water every other day because the media is drying out that much quicker. Aside from a temperature issue, 99% of the time, you got roots. So that's a good sign. Now for my Phalaenopsis here, who is in the bark and moss mix, I obviously drain any excess just like you would with any other orchid, regardless of the media. But because she is in moss and she's a phal and I don't want those roots to rot, I will let her sit and drain in a separate pot, and I will do that until there is no water that comes out. So let me set her off to the side for a few moments while she drains out the excess of that one. And let's look at Miss Looseberry here, who is in all moss. And as you can see, all that moss now is dampened. She's still working a little bit right in here, but just that little bit of water that I put in earlier has now spread throughout the orchid. And that is one of the great effects of moss, is its wicking ability, so that when you layer your bark and moss, make sure that each layer of moss is touching the previous before you move forward. And then this way it just spreads evenly around. And then let's look at our Cattleya here and see what she's done. And still a little bit here. She's still working a little bit up here, but for the most part, that moss has spread the water evenly. And the reason I did that, again, is she didn't have a very good root system when I initially put her in there. And as you can see, she now has some lovely roots. And I say this all the time about aerial roots and, oh, they don't like the media. But if you look, this one here started off as an aerial root and is now, let me move that leaf out, going down into the pot. This one came from outside of the pot across and is going back into the media. So it's not that they don't like the media they're in. I mean, it can be, that can be one of the reasons, but if you know that your media is good and it's fresh and you know, not nasty, then 99% of the time they're going where the humidity is. If the humidity is more in the air than it is in the pot, guess what? That's where they're going. And remember, these are epiphytes. They're used to finding things to climb onto. And so this looks super wet, and it is. She's very heavy now, but within 3 days, this right here, lady, is going to need to get another dunk in some water. And I am going to do a video on my fertilization routine, especially during the month of October, because it is technically the in-between end of growing season kind of things starting to go dormant. So look out for that coming up maybe this week. If not this week, definitely next week. And if you have any questions about what I've just said, be sure to leave those in the comments. I'm pretty sure I missed something. Oh, and here is the moss we started off with. Pull it out here. All of it is now nice and damp. I do have a little dry spot just right there on the edge, but overall it has absorbed. So a very little bit of water can plump up your moss. So be very careful when you use it, and remember it does raise the pH. Moss is acidic, so it does raise the pH. So if you need to pH up or pH down your water before using it, be sure to do that so that the orchids are getting the nutrients that you want to put in them. This go around was just plain filtered water. And I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend. I will see you guys on the next one.